Imagine earning a little more every year, yet somehow feeling just as trapped as you did 5 years ago. The paycheck changes. The phone gets newer. The apartment gets nicer. The car gets more expensive. But that quiet anxiety never disappears. You still hesitate before checking your bank account. You still wonder where the money went. And deep down, you secretly believe the real solution is simple. If I could just make more money. That's the lie. Not because earning more doesn't matter. It does. But because millions of people have already proven that income alone changes almost nothing. Think about it. How many athletes earned tens of millions and still went bankrupt? How many celebrities made fortunes only to lose everything? How many lottery winners ended up poorer than before they won? Money didn't disappear. Their behavior destroyed it. And that's where almost everyone looks in the wrong direction. We've been taught that wealth begins with income. Rich people know wealth begins with identity. There's a huge difference. One person receives $1,000 and immediately starts calculating what they can buy. Another receives the same $1,000 and immediately asks one question. How can this produce another 1,000? Same money, different mind, different future. Pause for a second. Which one feels more familiar? Because the amount isn't creating the outcome. The person is. That's uncomfortable to admit. It means for financial future isn't being written every payday. It's being written every ordinary Tuesday when nobody is watching. It's written every time you open a shopping app because you're bored. Every time you convince yourself you've earned another unnecessary expense. Every time your emotions make a financial decision before your brain even notices. The dangerous part is that none of these moments feel important. They're small, forgettable, almost invisible. But invisible habits build visible lives. Most people never realize they're spending years trying to increase income while quietly training themselves to destroy every dollar they receive. That's why raises disappear, bonuses vanish, business profits evaporate. Not because life is expensive, because identity is expensive. Now here's where psychology takes over. Society teaches you to admire wealth that can be seen. Luxury watches, designer clothes, expensive vacations, new cars, bigger houses. Social media celebrates evidence of spending far more than evidence of ownership. Nobody posts screenshots of patiently holding investments for 15 years. Nobody celebrates refusing an unnecessary purchase. Nobody applauds saying no. Consumption is exciting. Discipline is invisible. And invisible things rarely receive attention. That isn't an accident. Entire industries depend on convincing you that your identity comes from displaying success instead of quietly building it. Every advertisement whispers the same message. You'll become someone different after you buy this. You won't. You'll simply own one more object while remaining the same person making the same decisions. Inspired by Machiavellian principles, real power rarely announces itself. It protects itself. It grows quietly while everyone else competes for attention. That idea applies to influence. It also applies to money. The wealthiest mindset isn't obsessed with appearing successful. It's obsessed with becoming difficult to control. Think about that. Who controls someone drowning in debt? The lender. Who controls someone desperate for a paycheck? The employer. Who controls someone addicted to status? Everyone capable of offering approval. Money isn't only about buying freedom. It's about removing dependence. That's a completely different game. Most people believe rich people think about luxury. In reality, they think about options. Options to leave a toxic job. Options to reject bad opportunities. Options to wait. Options to negotiate. Options to stay calm while everyone else panics. Money isn't their goal. Control is. And control quietly creates even more money. This changes everything. Because once you understand that wealth is really the accumulation of choices, not possessions, you stop asking how to earn faster. You start asking a much more dangerous question. Who must I become so that money naturally stays, grows, and multiplies around me? That's the question poor thinking avoids. Because identity demands responsibility. You can't blame the economy for impulsiveness. You can't blame inflation for constant comparison. You can't blame rich people for emotional spending. Behavior eventually exposes belief. Habits expose identity. Identity predicts financial destiny. Before learning how rich people multiply small amounts of money, something more important has to happen. You have to stop thinking like someone trying to make money and start thinking like someone building an economic machine. Machines don't depend on motivation, they depend on systems. Rich people don't rely on discipline every day. They build environments where good financial decisions become automatic. The person who constantly resists temptation is fighting a battle. The person who removed temptation months ago already won. Can you see the difference? One is using willpower, the other is using design. That's why two people with identical salaries can end up living completely opposite lives. One spends according to feelings. The other spends according to strategy. One works for money. The other quietly teaches every dollar to work before spending another hour of life earning more. And this is only the beginning. Because the first brutal rule has nothing to do with investing, business, or saving. It begins with something far smaller, something almost everyone ignores, yet it quietly determines whether every future dollar becomes a servant or another master. The first brutal rule isn't about making more money. It's about refusing to let small amounts escape without a purpose. That sounds obvious, until you watch how most people actually behave. Imagine two co-workers leaving the office on a Friday evening. They earn the same salary, they have the same bills, the same opportunities. The first stops for an expensive dinner because it's been a long week. He orders food through an app twice over the weekend, upgrades a streaming subscription he barely uses, buys a few things online because they were on sale, and doesn't think much about it. None of the purchases seem reckless on their own. The second person also enjoys the weekend. But before spending anything, one question comes first. Will this expense make next month easier or harder? It's a tiny pause. 5 seconds. Yet those 5 seconds separate two completely different financial identities. One reacts, the other decides. Have you noticed how rarely anyone teaches that? We're taught how to budget. We're taught how to calculate interest. But almost nobody teaches the psychology of interruption. Rich people don't simply control money. They control the moment before money leaves. Inspired by Machiavellian principles, power belongs to the person who can master impulses before they become actions. Money follows the same rule. Every unnecessary expense begins as an emotion disguised as logic. I'm celebrating. I deserve it. It's only this once. Everyone else has one. The words change. The psychology doesn't. Warren Buffett has often emphasized that successful investing depends more on temperament than intelligence. That's true far beyond investing. Temperament decides whether a dollar survives long enough to become two. Think about that. If every small purchase has to defeat a calm, intentional decision instead of an emotional impulse, your financial life changes without increasing your income. That's why the wealthy often appear boring. Not because they dislike enjoyment, because they've learned something that most people never discover. Every dollar has two possible jobs: provide temporary pleasure or build permanent freedom. The strange part is that the first job is always louder. The second works in silence. Now the story gets uncomfortable. Most people don't actually have a spending problem. They have an emotional regulation problem. Stress creates shopping. Loneliness creates subscriptions. Boredom creates scrolling. Scrolling creates comparison. Comparison creates unnecessary spending. The purchase isn't the disease, it's the symptom. Imagine coming home after a difficult day. Within minutes, you're browsing online stores. Nothing urgent, nothing necessary. You're not buying because you need something. You're buying because you need to feel different. Companies understand this better than most consumers ever will. That's why advertisements rarely explain products. They sell emotions, confidence, belonging, status, comfort, recognition. The product simply becomes the vehicle. The transaction happens long before your credit card comes out. It happens inside your identity. Charlie Munger repeatedly warned about avoiding psychological mistakes before chasing financial gains. He understood that protecting your mind is often more profitable than finding the next investment. Because once emotions control purchases, income becomes almost irrelevant. Every raise simply increases the size of emotional decisions. This is where psychology takes over. Rich people don't ask, "Can I afford this?" Almost anyone with a credit card can afford something today. Instead, they quietly ask another question. What future opportunity disappears if I buy this now? That's leverage thinking. Every dollar spent is also a dollar that cannot buy ownership somewhere else. That hidden cost is invisible, but it's always there. The second brutal rule begins where most people stop thinking. Small money should never stay idle. Look around your home. How many objects are doing absolutely nothing? Now ask the same question about your money. Money sitting without direction slowly loses power. Inflation quietly reduces it. Impulse eventually spends it. Time slowly erodes it. The wealthy dislike idle assets, whether that's cash, knowledge, relationships, or skills. Everything must produce something, even if the return seems small. Sam Walton built Walmart through relentless attention to small efficiencies. Tiny savings, repeated thousands of times, became enormous competitive advantages. Most people ignore small gains because they don't feel exciting. The wealthy understand multiplication. $1 earning something becomes 2. 2 become 4. 4 become 8. Compounding doesn't impress impatient people. It rewards consistent ones. Be honest. Would you rather impress someone today or surprise everyone 10 years from now? That's the real decision. Because multiplication isn't dramatic, it's repetitive, it's almost boring. But that's exactly why so few people stay with it. They confuse excitement with progress. The wealthy don't. They trust systems more than feelings. Every month, money automatically moves into investments before lifestyle has a chance to consume it. Every bonus receives a job before celebration begins. Every increase in income strengthens ownership before comfort. Notice the pattern. They're not making hundreds of brilliant decisions. They're making a handful of excellent decisions repeatedly. That's what systems do. They reduce the number of emotional choices you have to make. Instead of asking yourself every payday whether you should save, the decision has already been made. Instead of wondering whether you'll invest this month, the transfer already happened. Your future no longer depends on today's mood. It depends on yesterday's system. And slowly, almost invisibly, your identity changes. You stop seeing money as something that arrives and disappears. You begin seeing it as a workforce. Every dollar becomes an employee. Some employees work harder than others. Some need better assignments. But none are allowed to remain unemployed. That's how rich people think. Not because they're obsessed with money, because they're obsessed with efficiency. And efficiency quietly creates freedom. But there's another trap that's even more dangerous. One that destroys wealth before investments ever have a chance to grow. It doesn't happen in the stock market. It happens in your social circle. And almost nobody sees it until it's already costing them thousands. Money rarely disappears because of one disastrous decision. More often, it leaks away through the people you're trying to impress. That's the third brutal rule. Protect your money from your audience. It sounds harsh, but look around. How many financial decisions are actually private? The clothes you wear, the car you drive, the phone you carry, the restaurants you choose. Even the vacations you post online. So many purchases aren't made to improve your life. They're made to shape someone else's opinion of you. Pause for a second. What's the most expensive thing you've ever bought that lost its emotional value within a few months? Almost everyone has an answer. Because status has an expiration date. The excitement fades, the payment doesn't. Inspired by Machiavellian principles, dependence is a form of weakness. If your sense of worth depends on external approval, Other people quietly gain influence over your decisions. That doesn't only affect power, it affects wealth. Imagine a young professional who finally gets a promotion. The salary increases by 20%. Within weeks, the apartment becomes larger. The car payment increases. Designer clothes replace perfectly functional ones. Weekend dinners become more expensive. Friends congratulate the upgrade. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, almost nothing changed. The higher income simply created higher obligations. Freedom stayed exactly where it was. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the quietest financial traps in modern life. The dangerous part is that society rewards it. People notice what you spend. They almost never notice what you own. If you quietly buy shares in a business, no applause. If you quietly build 6 months of emergency savings, no celebration. If you eliminate debt, hardly anyone notices. But finance a luxury car? Suddenly everyone sees success. Can you see the trap? Recognition often follows consumption. Freedom follows ownership. Those paths rarely look the same. This changes everything, because the wealthy learn to separate appearance from position. A king doesn't become powerful because his crown is expensive. He's powerful because he controls resources. Money works exactly the same way. Real wealth isn't visible, it's productive. Think about someone like Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA. Despite becoming one of the richest people in the world, he became known for living surprisingly modestly in many aspects of his personal life. That wasn't about being cheap. It was about refusing to confuse wealth with display. Every unnecessary dollar spent on image was a dollar that couldn't continue building ownership. That's leverage thinking again. Every decision asks the same silent question. Does this increase my options or reduce them? Now here's where almost everyone fails. They believe wealth requires constantly saying no. It doesn't. It requires saying not yet. Delayed gratification isn't punishment, it's positioning. Imagine being offered 2 lives. In the first, you can look wealthy immediately but remain financially dependent for decades. In the second, almost nobody notices your progress for years, but one day your investments produce more income than your job. Which life actually has more status? The answer depends on whose approval you're chasing. Most people want visible status. The wealthy want invisible strength. Those are completely different identities. The fourth brutal rule grows naturally from this. Protect your attention as fiercely as your money. That sounds unrelated. It isn't. Attention decides behavior. Behavior decides money. Look at the average morning. Before even getting out of bed, millions of people unlock their phones. Notifications, messages, social media, news, short videos, advertisements. Comparison begins before consciousness fully arrives. Within minutes, someone else's priorities have replaced your own. The mind becomes reactive, and reactive people make reactive financial decisions. Think about how often you've bought something after seeing it repeatedly online. Not because you needed it, because repetition created desire. Marketing rarely invents wants, it amplifies them. Rich people understand something subtle. The economy competes for your attention before it competes for your wallet. Win the first battle, and the second becomes much easier. Naval Ravikant has often spoken about building specific knowledge and long-term leverage instead of constantly reacting to noise. That idea extends beyond careers. Your attention is your greatest investment capital. Where attention goes, behavior follows. Where behavior goes, money follows. That's why the wealthy often consume information differently. They aren't disconnected from the world. They're selective. Instead of endless scrolling, they study businesses. Instead of chasing headlines, they read deeply. Instead of comparing lifestyles, they build assets. Every hour becomes either consumption or construction. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time 1 hour on social media increased your future income? Now compare that with 1 hour spent learning a valuable skill, improving your business, studying investing, or strengthening professional relationships. The difference compounds, not over days, over decades. That's the hidden cost of distraction. You don't lose money directly, You lose opportunities that would have created money. This is where psychology becomes uncomfortable again. People protect their wallets, but they leave their attention completely unguarded. That's like locking the front door while leaving every window open. Attention leaks become financial leaks. The fifth brutal rule has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with patience. Most people dramatically overestimate what can happen in 6 months. Then they completely underestimate what can happen in 15 years. That's why they quit. Imagine planting a tree. Every day you dig it up to check whether the roots are growing. Eventually, you kill the very thing you wanted to grow. Investments work the same way. Businesses work the same way. Skills work the same way. Relationships work the same way. Constant interruption destroys compounding. Rich people don't become wealthy because every decision is perfect. They become wealthy because enough good decisions survive long enough to multiply. Warren Buffett's fortune wasn't built through constant action. It was built through extraordinary patience combined with disciplined action. He allowed time to become his business partner. Time is the only multiplier available to everyone, yet it's treated like the least valuable asset. People want immediate evidence, immediate returns, immediate success, immediate recognition. But wealth often grows silently before it becomes obvious. Just like roots beneath the ground, nothing appears to happen until suddenly everything changes. And this is only the surface, because there's one psychological pattern even more destructive than impatience. It quietly convinces intelligent people to stay financially average for their entire lives, not because they lack opportunity, but because they never learn the difference between earning money and building systems that no longer depend on them. Most people spend their entire lives trying to become more valuable employees. Rich people spend their lives becoming less necessary to their own income. That difference changes everything. Imagine two people earning exactly the same amount. One wakes up every morning knowing that if they stop working, the money stops too. The other has spent years quietly building investments, ownership, digital assets, businesses, or income-producing systems that continue working whether they're awake or asleep. Both appear successful, only one is free. That's the sixth brutal rule. Build systems that survive your absence. Inspired by Machiavellian principles, lasting power comes from creating structures that don't depend on constant force. In modern financial life, those structures are assets. Think about it. A salary rewards your time. An asset rewards your ownership. One demands your presence. The other continues producing after you've left the room. This doesn't mean everyone needs to build a billion-dollar company. Far from it. It could be a portfolio of index funds that quietly compounds every month. It could be a small online business. It could be rental income. It could be intellectual property. It could be a skill that scales beyond hourly work. The form matters less than the principle. Every year, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. If I disappeared from work for 6 months, what income would still arrive? The answer reveals whether you're building wealth or simply earning a living. Robert Kiyosaki popularized the distinction between assets and liabilities. Whether or not you agree with all of his investment views, that core principle remains powerful. Assets tend to put money into your pocket, while liabilities tend to take it out. The wealthy keep increasing the first category. Most people accidentally expand the second. Think about that. Every financial decision is quietly choosing between future freedom and future obligation. This sounds simple until you understand what happens next. The seventh brutal rule isn't about money at all. It's about the people who influence your decisions. Behavior spreads. Spend enough time around impulsive spenders and expensive habits begin to feel normal. Spend enough time around disciplined builders and delayed gratification starts feeling natural. You don't just copy what people do. You absorb what they consider acceptable. Imagine two dinner conversations. At one table, everyone wants new cars, luxury brands, vacations, and promotions. At the other, People debate business ideas, investing, negotiation, productivity, ownership, and long-term strategy. Both groups influence you, but in completely different directions. Charlie Munger famously said, "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome." Your environment creates invisible incentives every single day. If your social circle rewards appearances, you'll eventually spend to maintain appearances. If it rewards ownership, you'll begin building ownership almost automatically. That's why wealthy people often guard their circles so carefully. Not because they believe they're better, because they understand that identity is contagious. Pause for a second. Who are the 5 people whose financial conversations you hear most often? Their beliefs are quietly shaping yours. The 8th brutal rule is one of the least glamorous and one of the most profitable. Increase your earning ability before increasing your lifestyle. When income rises, the temptation is immediate. Upgrade everything. Move faster. Celebrate bigger. Reward yourself first. The wealthy reverse the order. The extra income first strengthens investments, then strengthens cash reserves, then strengthens ownership. Only after those foundations grow does lifestyle gradually follow. Sam Walton could have surrounded himself with unnecessary luxury much earlier than he did. Instead, he repeatedly reinvested into the business that eventually became one of the largest retail companies in history. Reinvestment often looks unimpressive in the moment. Years later, it looks like genius. The difference isn't intelligence, it's restraint. Now the story becomes even more interesting, because money isn't only multiplied through investing, it's multiplied through reputation. That's the 9th brutal rule. Become someone others trust with opportunity. Think about the people who consistently receive partnerships, introductions, promotions, investment opportunities, and leadership roles. It's rarely because they're the loudest person in the room. They're reliable, disciplined, calm under pressure. They keep promises. They solve problems. They don't create unnecessary drama. Their reputation compounds exactly like money. Inspired by Machiavellian thinking, reputation is a strategic asset. Once people associate your name with consistency, opportunities begin arriving without constant chasing. Imagine 2 professionals with identical skills. One constantly seeks attention. The other quietly delivers results. 5 years later, who receives confidential opportunities? Who gets recommended? Who becomes trusted with larger responsibilities? Trust is invisible capital, and invisible capital often creates visible wealth. Can you see how this connects? Money follows value. Value follows behavior. Behavior follows identity. Everything leads back to who you become. Which brings us to the final brutal rule: protect your peace. That might sound strange in a conversation about wealth. It isn't. Financial panic creates terrible decisions. Greed creates terrible decisions. Fear creates terrible decisions. Ego creates terrible decisions. The wealthiest people aren't emotionless. They've simply trained themselves not to let temporary emotions rewrite permanent plans. Markets rise, markets fall. Businesses succeed, businesses fail. Economies expand, economies contract. People driven by my emotion chase every headline. People driven by principle quietly continue executing their systems. Warren Buffett's famous advice to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful reflects emotional discipline more than financial prediction. The principle applies everywhere. When everyone else is reacting,
you think?
When everyone else is showing off, you observe. When everyone else is rushing, you position yourself. That's quiet power. And quiet power compounds. Because the richest person in the room isn't necessarily the one with the highest income. It's the one with the greatest control. Control over impulses. Control over attention. Control over reputation. Control over emotions. Control over time. Control over choices. Money simply becomes the visible result of those invisible victories. Here's what almost nobody tells you. The first million isn't primarily a financial achievement. It's a behavioral achievement. Long before bank accounts change, patterns change. Long before portfolios grow, identity grows. Long before freedom becomes visible, discipline becomes ordinary. That's why rich people multiply small money. Not because they discovered a secret investment, not because they were born with extraordinary intelligence, not because they were luckier than everyone else. They built habits that protected every small advantage until those advantages became impossible to ignore. One decision became 10, 10 became 100, 100 became a system, and the system eventually produced a life that looked effortless to everyone who never saw the years of invisible discipline behind it. So the real question isn't whether you can multiply $100. It's whether you've become the kind of person that $100 wants to stay with. Because money always amplifies the character of its owner. Give discipline more resources and it builds freedom. Give impulse more resources and it builds bigger problems. That's the layer most people never see. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The next time you earn $1, don't ask, "What can this buy?" Ask a different question. What kind of person does this decision prove I'm becoming? Answer that question consistently enough, and one day people will assume your wealth appeared suddenly. They'll never realize they were only seeing the final chapter of a story that began with the smallest decisions no one else thought mattered. If you're drawn to exploring the psychology behind wealth, power, discipline, and long-term thinking, there's much more beneath the surface. This was only the first layer. The deeper patterns, the ones that shape influence, decision-making, and lasting freedom, are where the real transformation begins. Subscribe if that's the journey you want to continue.